Om Vishwandarpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyan Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bahirvod Bhutan Yatha Nidraya Yasakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namahidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktin च तत्पुत्र Parasharam च Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadam च Hastamalakam च Shishyam Tantotakam Vatikakaramanyaan Asmat Gurun Santatamanatosmi Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaran Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashyakritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Parabrahmanishtam Swato Dharmanishtam Ahinsaikanishtam Swashishya Sujushtam Yatinam Varishtam Gurunam Garishtam Dayananda Rupam Madacharya Mide Namah Shri Paramarthaya Sansaradhyasanashine Shrotriya Brahmanishthaya Tasmai Brahmavide Namaha Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Tapobhi Kshinapapanam Shantanam Vitaraginam Mumukshunam Apekshoyam Atma Bodho Vidhiyate. I welcome you all the 13th class of the Atma Bodha series. We will read verses 24, 25 and 26 that we had completed in the last class and review them. Prakashorkasya to yasya
Prakashorkasya to yasya
Shaityam Agneryatoshnata
Shaityam Agner Yatoshnata
Swabhavas Satchidananda
Svabhavas Satchidananda
Nitya Nirmalatatmanaha
Nitya Nirmala Tatmanaha
Atmanas Satchidam Shascha
Atmanas Satchidam Shascha
Buddhe Vrittiriti Dvayam
Buddhe Vrittir iti Dvayam
Sanyojya Cha Vivekena
Sanyojya cha vivekena
Janamiti Pravartate
Janamiti pravartate
Atmano Vikriya Nasti
Atmano vikriya nasti
Buddhir Bodho Na Jatviti
Buddhir bodho na jatviti
Jīva Sarvamalam Gyatva
Jīva sarvamalam nyatva
Jnata Drashteti Muhyati.
Nyata drashteti muhyati.
In these verses, Bhagavad is teaching us Atma Anatma Vivekaha. So why is this Atma Anatma Vivekaha required and what form does it take? Well, we saw that before the creation came into being, only Brahman was there, all-pervading, imperishable consciousness. And there is a second factor that is not really a second factor, which is Maya, entirely dependent upon Brahman for its existence. The Maya also was there. And the Maya is the entire world in an unmanifest form, exactly like the entire dream world that is about to emerge from the waker who is asleep, is in an unmanifest form in the waker's mind. From this Brahman, in association with Maya, worlds emerge like bubbles in the ocean, and beings emerge like ornaments from gold. Hatake katakadivat budbudaniva varini. So now the emphasis here is for us to understand that no new substance is created. Creation is only creation of nama rupas, never creation of a new substance. Therefore, this entire world and beings, the bodies of the beings that emerge, everything is mithya. Brahman alone is satya. That is what we come to know from this Srishti Prakriya. And once the upadhis of the Jīva have come about, the Sukshma and Sthula Shariras have come about, the same Brahman, which is the Satyam, as though gets enclosed within these upadhis. Just like space as though gets enclosed within pots. So this all-pervading consciousness, imperishable consciousness, is enclosed within each of these upadhis of the Jīva. So when the Jīva says I, Jīva is really referring to the all-pervading, imperishable consciousness. But then the Avarana Shakti of Maya comes in and covers the real nature of Brahman. So Jīva does not know that I am Brahman anymore. Therefore, the Samanya Jnanam is there that I am, but the Vishesha Jnanam that I am Brahman is not there. And therefore, the Jīva mixes up everything and starts to say, I am this body-mind. There's a mix-up of Atma and Anatma. And then says, I am Apurnaha, and then becomes a samsari. Starts to struggle in the world and becomes a samsari Jīva. Now, Atma and Anatma are of different orders of reality. When we say Atma, we are referring to this enclosed, imperishable consciousness. All-pervading, imperishable consciousness, enclosed, we are renaming it as Atma. So Atma and Anatma belong to different orders of reality. There cannot really be any mix-up between the two, just like the waker can never get mixed up with the dream. The waker is entirely unaffected by the dream. But still this mix-up happens because of ignorance. And this mix-up happens only in the mind of the Jīva, nowhere else. In reality, there is no mix-up at all. And therefore, if this mix-up has to be sorted out, it has to be sorted out only in the mind of the Jīva. Therefore, no physical separation of Atma and Anatma is required. Only the mix-up in the mind needs to be cleared up by understanding what is what. And therefore, this separation has to be done with yuktihi, like we saw, yuktihi avaghatataha. So during the course of the Atma Anatma Viveka, Bhagavad had pointed out that all these attributes, they belong to the body-mind. All the activities belong to the body-mind. The Atma is free of these attributes, free of all these activities. So then a question arises, what is the nature of Atma? That's what Bhagavad Pada says in verse 24. Svabhavaha Satchidananda Nitya Nirmalata Atmanaha. Atma is of the nature of Sat, Chit and Ananda. What is Sat? Sat is the Satyam Trikalepi Tishtati iti Sat. That which whose existence is never negated in all the three periods of time, past, present, or future, which always exists. As we see during Pralayam, the existence of everything goes. Everything becomes unmanifest. But what continues to be there is this Sat, Brahman. And even now, it is really there. Is this Sat, Brahman alone, because that's the only substance here. That is the Upadana Karanam. Everything else is Namarup. The Atma is of the nature of Sat, and then of the nature of Chit. Chit meaning of the nature of consciousness. That factor which makes this body-mind sentient. This body-mind are inert. But they have the sentiency, they have the borrowed sentiency. So what is inherently of the nature of consciousness, that is Atma and Atma alone. And of the nature of Ananda. When we say Ananda, we are not referring to this experiential happiness in the mind that comes and goes, because anything that comes and goes cannot be the nature of Atma. When we talk about Ananda, we're really talking about the limitlessness, wholeness, and fullness of the Atma. One is all-pervading, limitless in terms of space. And Brahman is imperishable, so limitless in terms of time. And Brahman is Satyam, so it is limitless even in terms of objects. Any object you take, Brahman is there as the very existence. Therefore, Atma is limitless, whole, full and complete. And this nature is what we refer to as Ananda. And this nature alone manifests in the mind as experiential happiness when the mind is in a conducive state. When a desire is accomplished, at that point, the mind is in a conducive state to manifest the Ananda in the form of experiential happiness. There is no happiness that comes from outside. Whatever happiness I experience in my mind is just a manifestation of my real nature, which is Atmananda, which never comes and goes. And Nitya Nirmalata. So Nitya refers to the imperishable nature of Atma. Birth and death belong to the body. We can say even to the mind, because during Pralaya, the Sukshma Sharira also goes. All these Sharira Trayam, they are perishable. Karana Sharira goes with the rise of knowledge. Whereas Atma is imperishable, Nityaha. And Nirmalaha, meaning ever pure. Atma being Satyam is never tainted by any mithya or any attributes of mithya. Satyam is always untouched by any mithya, just like mirage water can never wet the sand. They belong to different orders of reality. So then, in verse 25, Bhagavad Pada pointed out that Atma is not involved in any knowledge transaction. Atma is not the Pramata also. We have negated Karta and Bhokta, saying in Atma there is no doership and no enjoyership. And here we're saying there is no knowership also in the Atma. Atma is not involved in any knowledge transaction. Then who is the knower? Like we took the example of the room with a window and a mirror placed near the window, and there is a bulb in the room. The bulb illuminates the mirror, makes the mirror shine with reflected light. And using this mirror, I am able to direct the beam of light, beam of reflected light, to a few objects outside that are enveloped in darkness. And when this beam of reflected light falls upon them, those objects become visible. So we say the situation here is also very similar. The Atma is comparable to this bulb, which is self-luminous. The Atma is self-revealing because it's of the nature of consciousness. We say that just like in this physical world, contact with light is required to reveal any object, in our world, contact with consciousness is required to know any object. Atma, being of the nature of consciousness, is self-revealing. And then this window can be likened to our senses. This room can be likened to our body. So enclosed within this body, as though enclosed within this body, is this bulb-like Atma, which is the source of the light of consciousness. And the mirror is similar to the mind. The light is likened to the consciousness. Mirror is similar to the mind. Just as the mirror shines with reflected light, the mind shines with reflected consciousness. And even as any thought arises in the mind, since the thought is made of the same material as the mind, the thought also shines with reflected consciousness. And therefore, since the thought has contact with consciousness, even as it rises, the thought is automatically known. That is why I know everything that is going on in my mind without any special additional process of knowing. But then the objects outside, like they are enveloped in darkness, all of these objects outside are enveloped in ignorance. Darkness and ignorance are similar. Therefore, just like this beam of light goes from the mirror and strikes the object and illumines the object by removing the darkness, similarly, this thought that rises in the mind has to go out through the sense organs and come in contact with the object and envelop the object. Even as it envelops the object, it removes this darkness of ignorance. And then this thought is imbued with the reflected consciousness. So if there's a pot outside, the thought takes the form of the pot. So this vritti that goes out becomes a ghatakara vritti. And the ghatakara vritti carries the chaitanya pratibimba, a reflection of consciousness, chidabhasa. And therefore, this pot shines with reflected consciousness. This is what we call pot consciousness. Ghatakara vritti with chaitanyam become ghatakara chaitanyam, pot consciousness or pot knowledge. So this is the process of knowing. And in this process of knowing, what we are saying is that the reflected consciousness is the one that is actively involved. Just like in the reflected light in the mirror is the one that is being directed to the different objects and making them shine. What is the original light doing? It is doing nothing. It is just illuminating the whole space. It is not even illuminating the mirror in particular. It is just, its nature is illumination. Similarly, the original consciousness, that is the Atma, is not an active participant in the knowing transaction. It is just an illuminator, illumining with the light of consciousness. Then who is the knower? Really speaking, I should say, the reflected consciousness in the buddhi is the pramata. And the reflected consciousness in the vritti, in the thought, is the Jnanam Brahma. So the Pramata, the reflected consciousness, is the Jnata Drashta. It is the knower, it is the seer, hearer, taster, smeller, thinker. But if the fact that there is this separate, independent, original consciousness is not known, just like the mirror with the reflected light may start to think that I alone am the source of the light. The source of light I am. Ignoring the original source of light. Then what happens is that this reflected light is taken to be the original, ignoring the original. And then it gets mixed up with the attributes of the mirror. This reflected light gets mixed up with the attributes of the mirror. It starts to say, I extend only this much. And my lifetime is limited to the lifetime of the mirror. So similarly, if the fact that this original consciousness is there is not known, then this reflected consciousness that says I am, says that I am an attribute of this body and mind. I am, these attributes of the body and mind are my attributes. There's a mix-up that happens with the reflecting media. And then it starts to say, I am limited, I extend only this much, I am mortal. Therefore, if the nature of the original consciousness is not known, if the fact that there is an original consciousness that is not a part, product, or property of the body, that's an independent principle that is not known, then this reflection takes itself to be the original and mixes up with the attributes of the body mind. So it becomes the limited, it says, I am the limited knower. And then becomes a samsari. So in verse 26, Bhagavad Pada says, what is the necessity for this reflected consciousness? What is the necessity to introduce this? Because Atma is nirvikaraha, it is changeless. So Atma cannot alone be responsible for the knowing process, just like this bulb alone cannot illumine the objects outside. Similarly, the mind, the buddhi, doesn't have any inherent consciousness. Buddhi alone cannot illuminate anything outside. Just like the mirror by itself. Buddhi alone cannot illumine anything outside without the consciousness, just as this mirror cannot illuminate anything outside if you switch off the light. And therefore, this third factor, which is the reflected light in the mirror, is required. Similarly, this reflected consciousness is brought in, and this is what we call the Jīva. So this Jīva is the one that says, Jnata Drashta iti Muhyati, becomes deluded, becomes a limited Jīva, becomes a samsari. We'll move on to our next verse. The whole process is that I have to recognize that I am this independent consciousness. It is not a part, product, or property of the body. I have to do this Atma Anatma Viveka. So this idea, Bhagavad Pada is carrying forward in the next verse also. Rajju Sarpavadatmanam
Rajju sarpavadatmanam
Jivam Gyatva Bhayam Vahet.
Jīvam Jnatva Bhayam Vahet.
Naham Jiva Paratmeti.
Naham Jīvah Paratmeti.
Gyatanchet Nirbhayo Bhavet.
Jnatam Chet Nirbhayo Bhavet.
Bhagavad Pada comes to our favorite example, the Rajju Sarpa, the rope snake. So when we examine the rope snake, the problem is that when the adhishthanam, the rajju, is not known, then it is mistaken to be something else. The samanya jnanam that this is long and curved is there, vishesha jnanam that this is a rajju is not there. Therefore, it is mistaken to be a sarpa. So, atasmin tad buddhi, this is the adhyasa. In the not that, you see that. In the not snake, you see the snake. That is, in the harmless rope, you see the snake. When this happens, there is then fear. Bhayam vahet. Fear, palpitation, screaming, running, beating, all of these things are there. But when one awakens to the fact that what is really there is a rope, Nayam Sarpaha, he says, Naham Jīvaha. Similarly, we will come to the real thing later. We will look at the example. So the extension to the example, it will be Nayam Sarpaha, na Ayam Sarpaha. Rajjuhu iti jnatva nirbhayo bhave. Nayam sarpaha rajjuhu iti jnatam ched nirbhayo bhave. When he knows that this is a harmless rope, the snake is only an appearance, not the reality. Then he becomes fearless. All that fear goes. So similarly, we say Atmanam Jīvam Jnatva. Like Rajjum Sarpam Gyatva Bhayam Vahet. Like when the rope is misunderstood to be the snake, there is fear. Similarly, Atmanam Jivam Gyatva, when this Atma is misunderstood to be the Jiva, then Bhayam Vahet. Then one carries the load of fear. Fear is inevitable. So when the Adhishthanam is really the Atma. When the Adhishthanam is not known as Satchit, Ananda, Nitya, Nirmala, like we saw, Svabhavaha Satchidananda. If the nature of Atma is not known, then it is mistaken to be something else. What is it mistaken to be? It is mistaken to be this reflection of consciousness. Atma is really what I mean by the word I. But when the nature of Atma is not understood, true nature of Atma is not understood, then this I, instead of being placed in the Atma, is being placed in the reflected consciousness, which is Anatma. Just like the this, if the this is not placed in the rope, then the this is placed in the snake. Similarly, if the I is not placed in the Atma, then the I is placed in the Chidabhasa Jiva, the limited knower, doer, enjoyer, limited Pramata, Karta, Bhokta, Chidabhasa. So this is like the waker who is asleep, forgetting that I am the waker, and then identifies with this limited dream individual. And then he struggles in this dream. He sees a separate dream world and begins to struggle in that dream. Or an actor in a play. Let's say there's an actor in a play. And he's a really famous actor who's a millionaire. So the actor is given a role in a drama. So there's this drama going on with a lot of people sitting there. So the actor has entered the drama in the form of a beggar. So he's worn all these rags and he has got all this dirt over his body. And he's sitting there with a begging bowl. And so he's playing the role of a beggar in the drama. And now what happens is that he forgets the fact that he is the actor. So now what is he saying? He thinks that I am really this beggar. Something happened. He's sitting there and then begging with his bowl when there's a passerby, and the script says that the passerby is supposed to come and he says, Thoda de do, something de do. And he's supposed to say, change nahi hai. There's no change. He's looking at his mobile and he says, there is no change. So then he has taken himself to the beggar. So now he starts to say lines that are not in the script. He says, change nahi hai to GPay kar do. And he says, he shows him the mobile and says, here's my QR code. Why don't you GPay me some money? And then the other person is stunned. What is he saying? This is not supposed to be in the script. And then it doesn't end there. For a moment, even the director thought that this guy was improvising on the script. And he was feeling happy that the audience is also laughing along with him. But then things got a bit more serious. And then he got down from the stage and he went around begging in the audience. Puja Swamiji gives this example. He started begging in the audience. And even collected some GPay amount from the audience. So then these people knew that there was something wrong. This guy needs to be counseled. And what does the counselor tell him? He says, the counselor will tell him, you are not this role of the beggar. You are not this beggar. Then he'll say, who am I? He'll say, you are the actor that is not a product or property of this beggar. You are the actor that is an independent principle that pervades this beggar and enlimens the beggar. You, the actor, are not limited by the boundaries of the beggar. Because even after that, once this drama ends, once you put off, remove your costume, at that point you are the actor who drives around in your Mercedes. You are not this beggar. And even after this beggar goes, you survive as an actor. So you can come up with the 5 principles of the actor. So this is what the counselor tells the beggar. But just like this waker who gave up his nature of being the waker and became this dream individual, just like the actor who gave up his nature of being the actor and became the beggar. Similarly, I have given up my true nature of the Atma. I am the Atma. I have given up my real identity and put my I elsewhere and taken myself to be this limited Jīva, and then I suffer subsequently. Atmanam Jīvam Jnatva. What happens? Bhayam vahe. Fear is inevitable. Why is fear inevitable? Because as the limited Jīva, as the Chidabhasa, and Chidabhasa identified with this reflecting media of the body and mind, I have entered the world of duality. I am in a world of duality because I see multiplicity everywhere. I see that I am the limited individual in this separate world, and then there is time and space. Duality always comes with time and space. And therefore, there is limitation associated with time. Therefore comes mortality. Body, mind are all associated with time. They come and go. Therefore, there is mortality. So duality brings in time and space. Time and space brings in the limitation of mortality, which is limitation of time. And then there is limitation of space. I am only restrained myself to this body and mind. I become this puny individual in this immense world. So there is limitation of space also. So I become limited as a pramatha, alpagya. I become limited as a karta, alpa shaktiman. And I become limited as a bhokta, subject to the law of karma. Like Swamiji says, life is like a boxing match where you are blindfolded and you're facing an opponent. Who is this opponent? Who is landing the blows upon you with your own prarabdha karma. I can't see my prarabdha karma. In a real boxing match, I can see my opponent. So when the opponent is getting ready with a blow, I can duck or do something else. But in this case, I am blindfolded and my opponent is my own prarabdha. I don't know where the next blow is going to come from. I'm helpless. As a bhokta, I am helpless in the hands of prarabdha karma. Like Bhartrahari says, Vyagri ivatisthati jara. In this old age, jara is waiting like a tigress, waiting to pounce upon me. In some ways, the worst prarabdha of every individual is yet to come in the old age. Old age brings a lot of issues that don't have a resolution. So as this jiva, I am in the hands of forces way beyond my control. And then, like we said, there is all the body, mind, family, possessions, profession. So I become identified with the body, mind, the mortality, my own mortality, fear of my own mortality. And through this body, mind, I am related to a few other people. And then there is fear of mortality of those people also who I am related to. And then there is fear of possessions, fear of losing the possessions, fear of a stock market crash, fear of thieves. All of this comes in the world of duality. And then there's a profession, fear of getting laid off, fear of getting obsolete because AI is coming up everywhere. What is going to happen to all the jobs? So all of these fears are inevitable. Bhayam vahe. As long as one is identified as puny individual in this wide world, puny, mortal, limited individual. That is what I have descended to. So as this Jīva Chidabhasa, one has to face all of these turmoil and is subject to all the vagaries of the reflecting media. Asti, jayate, vardhate, viparinamate, apakshiyate, vinashyati. Fear of change. I become too comfortable in a given situation. When things change, then that brings in fear about whether life will be as good as it was. So all of these fears come in. Therefore, what is the resolution for this? I have to reverse this process. Naham jivaha, na aham jivaha, aham jivaha, na naham jivaha. Just like this waker who got stuck in this dream world as his dream individual. The only resolution is awaken. Waken up, awaken to your real nature, know the adhishthan. He knows that I am the adhishthan, the waker, who is unaffected by the dream because I am not a participant in the dream at all. Or like this actor who got identified with the beggar, finally he understands that I am the actor. I am not the role. And I, as an actor, I don't play any role in the drama at all. I'm unaffected by whatever happens in the drama. In fact, if I play my role well, then I get some additional bucks in my account. So I am not affected at all by all of these ups and downs that happen in the drama. Therefore, the only solution here is to disown the Chidabhasa Jiva. That the Chidabhasa is under the control of Prarabdha. Let the Chidabhasa and the reflecting media take its course. They are all subject to Prarabdha. Prarabdha brought them into being, and Prarabdha will take them away when the time comes. And I have to understand I am not this reflected consciousness or the reflecting media. Then what should I claim? Who am I then? Just like this waker says, I am the waker, the actor finally says, I am the actor, not the beggar. Similarly, I have to say, Paratmeti, Naham Jivaha, Paratma iti. Aham Paratma. I have to say, I am this Paratma. So I know myself as this Para Atma, or the original consciousness, Para limitless Atma, Para Atma. This original consciousness, not this reflected consciousness that is limited to this body. So how do I know this original consciousness? First of all, the original consciousness, I can never know it as an object. So all of this body-mind, it has got this drishyatvam, bhautikatvam, sagunatvam, sabikaratvam, agama payitvam. Nanatma. It doesn't have its inherent consciousness. So whatever consciousness is there in the body mind, it is the borrowed consciousness, reflected consciousness. So I understand that I am not this borrowed consciousness that is perceptible in this body and mind. Then who am I? If there is borrowed consciousness, there should be a lender. Without a lender, there cannot be a borrow. So I am this original consciousness that is the lender of this consciousness to this body mind. I am this consciousness, original consciousness that is not a product of property of the body mind. This is Paratma. I am an independent principle that pervades the body mind and enlivens the body mind by lending it consciousness. I am not limited by the boundaries of the body mind. This reflected consciousness is limited by the boundaries of the body mind. I am not limited by the boundaries of the body. And this reflected consciousness moves on. When this body mind dies, it is the one that travels. But I am the original consciousness that is not affected by the coming and going of the body mind, and that doesn't travel. Because I am all pervading. And this original consciousness, I am this original consciousness that survives even the death of the body mind, but cannot be transacted with, not because it is not there, but because there is no medium for it to manifest. The way this original consciousness manifests is in the form of this reflected consciousness in the body mind. So I have to do this viveka and claim myself that I am this original consciousness, this Paratma. The original consciousness can only be known in one way, only in one way, as I. I have to pluck the I from this reflected consciousness and place it in the original consciousness. And once this happens, I understand that all of these transactions and samsara and all of that, and all of these difficulties in the samsara, etc., they all belong to this reflection of mine, not to me. Just like when I see my face in a pool of water that has some disturbance and my reflection appears to be moving, I know that all of those movements belong to the reflection, not to me. Therefore, As this Chidabhasa, I become this puny, limited, mortal Jiva in the subject to various forces. As this original consciousness, I become the Satyam Atma that is unaffected by anything mithya, where no force can touch me at all. And I'm free of the threefold limitations of the space, time, and object. I am all pervading. I am imperishable, free of the time-wise limitation. I am all-pervading, free of the space-wise limitation. And I am Satyam, I pervade everything and lend existence to everything. Therefore, I am also free of any object-wise limitation. So just like the waker is not a part of the dream, the actor is not a part of the drama. Similarly, as this original consciousness, Paratma, I am not a participant in this drama of duality. Aham Paratma, iti jnatam chet. If this is known, if I know this, then nirbhayo bhave. Nirbhayo bhave. I become fearless. Just like upon knowing the rope, the fear of the snake goes. Because I have known the Adhishthana. Or upon knowing that I am the waker, all of these fears that I had in the dream world, all of them evaporate. Similarly, upon knowing that I am this Paratma, this limitless Atma, there is no fear of duality anymore, because all fear arises from duality. Dvitiyadvai bhayam bhavati, says the Upanishad. The moment, anytime there is duality, there is fear. But now I have become the Satyam Atma. As the Satyam, I alone am. I alone am. Therefore, there is no second thing. There is no second thing for me to be afraid of. There is no second thing at all. Therefore, nirbhayo bhavet, he becomes a jivan muktaha. He becomes liberated. In fact, he doesn't become liberated. He just places this I in the right place, which was already liberated to begin with. Nitya muktaha. Was never bound at all in order to be liberated. Nirbhayo bhavet. We'll continue with the next shloka. आत्मावभासयत्येकः
आत्मा अवभासयत् एकः
बुद्ध्यादीनीन्द्रियाण्यपि
बुद्ध्यादीनीन्द्रियाण्यपि
दीपो घटादिवत् स्वात्मा
दीपो घटादिवत् स्वात्मा
जडैस्तैर्नावभास्यते
जडैस्तैर्न अवभास्यते
अहम परात्मा इति ज्ञातं चेत् निर्भयो भवेत् विश्वास. So I have to come to the understanding that I am this Paratma, a limitless Atma, or Brahman in other words. So these subsequent two verses are discussing what knowing the Atma involves. And it points out that it is not like knowing any other object. To know any other object, there has to be a subject that is different from that object. But if I have to know the Atma, then there is no subject different from Atma that can know the Atma. Because if we are looking for a subject other than the Atma, then there are only two possibilities. it has to be anatma. It has to be either anatma or another atma. Now, anatma is inherently inert. It has no consciousness of its own. And therefore, anatma by itself cannot know the atma because it is jada. And it is drishyam, as we have seen. Drishyau dvau padarthau stah paraspara vilakshanav. Drig and drishyam are of opposite nature. They're always of opposite nature. The drig can never become the drishyam can never become the drig. And therefore, this anatma, which is drishyam, can never become the drig, which is a knower. Nor can this drig become a drishyam, nor can this atma become something that is seen. Okay, so we eliminate the possibility that anatma knows the atma. Then what about the possibility that another atma knows this atma? We say even that is not possible because there is no other atma. That's why Bhagavad says here, Atma avabhasayati ekaha. Atma is one and non-dual. So there is no question of another Atma also knowing this Atma. So Atma avabhasayati. Atma is always this drik that illumines. Buddhyadini indriyani api. So this entire anatma, consisting of this world and body, mind, senses, they are all illumined by the Atma. So Atma avabhasayati, ekaha Atma avabhasayati. Kim avabhasayati? Buddhyadini indriyani api. It illuminates this buddhi, etc. And all of my senses, they are all illumined by the Atma. So can all of this buddhi, indriyas, etc. know the Atma? Saying, Swatma jadaihi taihi na avabhasyate. So taihi jadaihi swatma na avabhasyate. Meaning that Atma cannot be illumined, na avabhasyate. Using karmani prayoga here, passive voice. He's saying Atma cannot be illumined by these, taihi, jadaihi, by these that are insentient, inert by nature. Atma cannot be illumined. And he gives the example, Deepaha Ghatadivat. Like in a room, there is a light, a lamp that illumines the pot. The lamp is the illuminator, the pot is the illuminant. So we cannot change the situation to somehow have the pot illumine the lamp. That is impossible. So similarly, Atma is ever the knower, the illuminator, the changeless knower, the illuminator. It is never the knower. So this has to be very clear. Drigeva Sakshi, Drigeva Natu Drishyate. This witness consciousness is ever the Drig, never the Drishyam. It can never be seen in the sense of knowing. It can never be known in the sense of knowing any other object. So then there is, we look at the next verse that continues on the same theme. Swabodhe nanyabodhe cha.
Svabodhe nanyabodhe cha.
Bodha rupatayatmanaha.
Bodha rupatayatmanaha.
Nadipasyanyadeepecha.
Nadipasyanyadeepecha.
Yatha swatma prakashane.
यथा स्वात्मप्रकाशने
Swabodhe nanya bodhya ichha. Swabodhe na anya bodhecha. Bodha rupataya atmanah. So, in the previous verse, Bhagavad had said that all this buddhi, indriya, etc., they are all jadam. Taihi jadaihi na avabhasyate. They are all jadam. But one can say that, hey, the buddhi, senses, etc., they are able to know the objects. So how can you say they are jadam? They have consciousness. So we say, yes, that is true. But consciousness is not their nature. They have reflected consciousness or borrowed consciousness. So then there can be a question that with this borrowed consciousness, can they not know the Atma? Just like with borrowed consciousness, they know pot, cot, mat, hat, etc. They know various objects in the world. Can they not know the Atma with this borrowed consciousness? So we say that Atma can never be known as an object by the buddhi, etc. It can never be known as an object. But Atma need not be known as an object. Atma need not be known as an object. See, we are so accustomed to knowing everything as objects that when one comes to Atma Jnanam, one carries the same orientation. And then there is a struggle to somehow objectify the Atma, to somehow know the Atma as an object. So this verse clearly negates that possibility. Swabodhe na anya bodhecha bodha rupatayatmanaha. So we have to understand, before we get into the meaning of these words, we have to understand how anything is known. How any object is known first. Let's understand that. We've already touched upon it. That to know any object, we need a thought. We need a vritti. And that vritti has to go out through the senses and take the form of the pot. Like we discussed in today's class itself, ghatakara vritti has to take place in the mind. And once the ghatakara vritti takes place, then there is reflection of consciousness in the ghatakara vritti that we call ghatakara chaitanyam, which is pot consciousness or pot knowledge. So in this process, there are two things that happen, we say. But initially, the pot is enveloped in ignorance. It is an unknown pot. We say, I don't know the pot. It's an unknown pot. The pot is enveloped by ignorance. So now when this vritti goes out and it envelops the pot, then the ignorance is removed. So Vishaya Avarana Nivrittihi happens. The ignorance that is enveloping the pot is removed by this vritti vyaptihi, by when the thought pervades the pot, which is called vritti vyaptihi, then Vishaya Avarana Nivrittihi happens. The ignorance is removed. But that is not enough. We need the pot also to be illumined in my consciousness, and therefore there is this reflection of consciousness that is there in the ghatakara vritti. And this reflection of consciousness illumines the pot. This is called phala vyaptihi. So there are two things involved, vritti vyaptihi and phala vyaptihi. So this does the first stage does the Vishaya Avarana Nivrittihi, the removal of ignorance, and then the second stage of Phala Vyaptihi does the Vishaya Prakasha. So this is how pot consciousness, pot knowledge takes place. But now let us come to the Atma Jnana. So Atma is also covered, the nature of Atma is covered by the Avarana Shakti of Maya. by the ignorance. So now, are both of these stages involved in Atma Jnanam? That is the question. So I need a vritti. I need a vritti in the mind in order to know the Atma, which is called the Atmakara Vrittihi, or the Akhandakara Vrittihi, or the Brahmakara Vrittihi, or Aham Brahmasmi Vrittihi. This Vrittihi has to arise in the mind for the Atma to be known. But then, does this involve both the stages? That is the question. So we say there is a difference. That does Atmakara Vrittihi, that has to pervade the Atma and take the form of the Atma. That is required in order to remove the ignorance. For the Vishaya Avarana Nivrittihi, the Atmakara Vrittihi is required. First step is required. But then, for the Vishaya Prakashaha, in order to illumine the Atma, there is in this Atmakara Vritti also there is Chidabhasa. The reflection of consciousness is there, but I don't need the reflection of consciousness in order to illumine the Atma, because the Atma is of the nature of consciousness. It is self-revealing, it is self-evident. So inert objects like the pot, etc., they need both the vritti vyaptihi as well as the phala vyaptihi. They need, the ignorance has to be removed, and subsequently they need to be illuminated by the reflection of consciousness. Like this mirror with reflected light is needed to illumine every object outside in the dark outside. But then, when it comes to the Atma, the vritti is required. Atmakara vritti is required, which removes the ignorance of the nature of Atma. So the vritti vyaptihi is required. But this phala vyaptihi, which illumines the object with the reflection of consciousness, is not required in case of Atma, because the Atma is self-revealing. To say that this reflected consciousness is required in order to illumine the Atma, that is of the nature of consciousness, is like saying that the mirror has to be turned inwards in order to illumine the light bulb, which is already shining. We don't need the mirror, we don't need the reflected light in the mirror in order to illumine the light bulb. The light bulb is already illumined with its own light. In fact, it is the light that is lending the light to the mirror. In fact, the Atma is lending consciousness to this vrittihi that then illumines everything else. But this reflected consciousness is not needed to illumine the original. For example, let's take the example of a committee meeting. So in a committee meeting, there's the chairman sitting here. And then there is all this secretary, the joint secretary, and the president, and the vice president, and the treasurer. All of these people are sitting there. So then they have to mandatorily prepare these minutes of the meeting. And the first thing in the minutes of the meeting are who all are in the meeting. So the chairman takes an attendance and says, the president there, yes, he looks, the president there, secretary there, treasurer there, and joint secretary is there, vice president is there. For each of them, he has to look. But when it says who is the chairman, is the chairman there? He doesn't have to look around. He just says, yes, chairman is there. So the same thing is happening here. The Atma, the consciousness, is self-evident as this I. I don't need any special process of knowing in order to know that I is there, that I am. I don't need any pramana vyapara to know that I am. And just like every object, everything else needs to be objectified in order to know that it is. I don't need to objectify myself in order to know that I am. Every object experience comes and goes. I say, this is a pot. And then subsequently, I move on to say, this is a cot. So then the pot objectification goes, cot objectification comes in, mat objectification comes in. All of these objectifications come and go. But then the subject is always there in every objectification as the very subject. So for anatma experience, I have to work for. To experience anatma, I have to do this pramana vyapara. But to experience the atma, I don't need any pramana vyapara. I don't need any process of knowing. So people talk about the special experience of the atma. I have to experience the atma in meditation. So we ask this person that in that atma experience, is atma an object of experience? Because the atma becomes an object of experience, then that cannot be the atma. Because you have objectified the atma. Whatever you have objectified, sometimes people say, I experienced some lights in meditation, or I experienced a certain warmth in meditation. So is there any such experience involved finally in this realization? So we say that it is not like this. If you have objectified something, then whatever you objectified is not the Atma. So the special experience of Atma that you talk about cannot have this Atma as an object. So then, does this special experience of Atma, what is the Atma then? The only option left is one has to say Atma is the subject in that special experience. So we have to say, why does one need a special experience for the Atma to be the subject? Because the Atma is there as a subject in every experience. In every experience, the Atma is there as the subject, as this very I. We say Vedanta is not about gaining an extraordinary experience of the Atma. Vedanta is not about gaining an extraordinary experience of the Atma, but Vedanta is about gaining an extraordinary knowledge about the Atma that is present in every mundane experience. We are not after an extraordinary experience, but we are jigyasus. We are jigyasus for what jnanam? For that extraordinary jnanam. The knowledge is extraordinary. That helps me understand the Atma that is present in every mundane experience. So swabodhe, in knowing the Atma, na anya bodhe cha. There is no need for any separate knowing process that reveals or illumines or experiences the Atma. For knowing every other object, pramana vyapara is required. I need to work in order to gain that experience. But for knowing the Atma, no special pramana vyapara is required in order to reveal, illuminate, or experience the Atma. Why? Bodha rupataya atmanaha. The Atma is of the nature of consciousness. It is self-revealing. Just like that bulb is of the nature of light. We don't need the mirror to turn back towards the bulb in order to illuminate. With the reflected light, that is even more ridiculous. So this bodha rupataya atmanaha, this bodha rupata is always there. It is the nature of Atma. Therefore, it's present in every experience. And Bhagavad gives the example, na deepasya anya deepecha. Yatha swatma prakashane. Just like a lamp doesn't need another lamp to illuminate. The lamp illumines everything, doesn't need another light to illumine itself. So if we are in a dark room, let us say, and I'm carrying a torch with me, and then every object in the dark room is covered with a cloth. Every object in that room is covered with a cloth. Now, what do I have to do in order to know the object? I have to remove the cloth and shine the torch on the object. Remove the cloth, shine the torch. So remove the cloth, shine the torch. This is a pot. Remove the cloth, shine the torch. This is a mat. Remove the cloth, shine the torch. This is a cloth. But now let us say that underneath that cloth, there is another lamp. Underneath the cloth is a lamp. So what do I have to do in order to know that lamp? Just remove the cloth. Now I don't have to shine the torch. That is why vritti vyaptihi, to remove the ignorance is required. But this phala vyaptihi, that illuminates the object, is not required. That is why we say, in case of the Atma, just the ignorance needs to be removed. Only the removal of ignorance is required. I don't need to do anything further to illumine the Atma. It is like that lamp that is covered by the cloth. Just remove the cloth, that is enough. Because the Atma is self-evident. It doesn't need to be illumined, objectified, experienced separately. So even in the state of ignorance also we say the Atma is self-evident. It is self-luminous. As this very I, the Atma is experienced even in the state of ignorance. But the problem is that it is wrongly known. The Atma that is experienced is wrongly known. As this I am this body, I am this mind, I am limited, I am mortal. The same I am is very much there even in the state of ignorance. Just like even in the state when I am looking at the snake, the rope is very much there. In fact, the rope is the one that is there as this. This refers to the rope only. The rope is there, but it is wrongly known as the snake. The Atma is very much there in the state of ignorance, it is wrongly known. Therefore, what do I have to do? Know the Atma rightly by removing all this ignorance. That is enough. Just right knowledge of the Atma is enough. I don't need a separate experience of the Atma. So when we do this arati, in this arati, there is a mantra that is chanted. न तत्र सूर्यो भाति न चंद्र तारकम हेम विद्युतो भान्ति कुतोऽयमग्निः तमेव भान्तमनुभाति सर्वं तस्य भासा सर्वमिदं विभाति. What are we saying there? We are talking about the nature of the Lord. We are talking about the nature of Atma Brahman. Saying that na tatra suryo bhati, that the sun cannot illumine the Atma. The Chandra Tarakam, all these luminaries, the celestial luminaries, the moon and the stars, they cannot illumine the Atma. Na vidyuto bhanti. All these flashes of lightning are also not needed to illumine the Atma. They are all luminaries that illumine everything else, but they cannot illumine the Atma. Kutoyam agnihi. So what about the small camphor light that I am showing? Right. I'm showing this small camphor light. What can this do when these great luminaries cannot illumine the Atma? Because the Atma is self-evident. The Atma is self-shining. So this camphor light is not required to illumine the Atma, to illumine the Lord. But it is required just to dispel my own ignorance, that's all. My own ignorance needs to be dispelled. It is not required to illumine that in whose light everything shines. Tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam. Everything shines after the light of the Atma, after the light of the Lord. Self-shining Lord. So these luminaries are not required to illuminate. If at all the light is required, it is required only to dispel my ignorance. Ameva bhantam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. So then why do I need the study of Vedanta? If the Atma is self-evident, if the Atma is there in every experience, why do I need the study of Vedanta? We say that this study of Vedanta is required in order to understand properly that this I that is there in every experience is none other than Brahma. So this aham brahmasmi vritti jnanam is required not to illumine the Atma, not to objectify the Atma, but it is needed to remove the ignorance. Just the vritti vyapti is required, the phala vyapti is not required. It is just needed to remove the ignorance. But we say that why can't the ignorance go if I experience the Atma? If I go to Nirvikalpaka Samadhi and experience the Atma, can the ignorance not go? We say no, because the ignorance is in a lower order of reality. When something is in a lower order of reality, then only another thing in the same order of reality can be the destroyer of that object. If I have dream thirst, then only dream water can quench my dream thirst. The real water by the bedside is of no use in quenching my dream thirst. If there is a dream monster, to behead that dream monster, I need a dream sword. That real sword by the bedside cannot behead the dream monster. Similarly, we say that this ajnanam is in a lower order of reality. Therefore, only something in that same order of reality can remove that ignorance. That is why this vritti jnanam is required, that is in the same lower order of reality that removes this ignorance. Atma is shining already. Atma is present in every experience. I just need to remove that ignorance. And this Atma that is in the higher order of reality cannot be a destroyer of something in the lower order of reality. Just like this real water in the higher order of reality cannot quench my dream thirst, just as this real sword that is in the higher order of reality cannot behead this dream monster in the lower order of reality. So this vritti has to arise in my mind that is in the same order of reality as the ignorance, and that alone can be the destroyer of ignorance. So even if I go to Nirvikalpaka Samadhi without coming to Vedanta, without the Aham Brahmasmi Jnanam, if I have just gone to Nirvikalpaka Samadhi, the ignorance continues to be there. Atma happily coexists with the ignorance because there is a difference in the order of reality. So just like Rajju Jnanam is the one that destroys the Sarpa, Rajju is not opposed to the Sarpa. Rajju happily coexists with the Sarpa. The rope happily coexists with the snake. The rope is not opposed to the snake. We need the Rajju Jnanam that comes in and destroys the Rajju Ajnanam and the snake Adhyasa. So similarly, the Aham Brahmasmi Vritti is required that comes and destroys this ignorance. So we need the mind to destroy the ignorance, not to illumine the Atma. In the presence of ignorance, I don't stop with the I am. I say that I am tall, I am short, I am mortal, I am limited, I am suffering. All of this is superimposed because of the ajnanam of the nature of the I. So the words of Vedanta are required, the introductory words of Vedanta are required in order to introduce this Atma to myself. The Atma that is present in every experience is introduced to myself in the form of Brahman, that this Atma is none other than Brahman. So the introductory words of Vedanta are required, through which I come to know that I am this Satyam Brahma that is unaffected by every mithya. Atma Satyam Tadanyat Sarvam Mithyati. With this, the Atma Ajnanam is destroyed and the self-evident Atma is known properly as Brahman, as the Satyam Brahma that is unaffected by every mithya. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Aham Brahmaiva Naparaha. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.